Oh boy, you guys remember that high we were on a few days ago when Thatcher Demko signed a 5x5, a solid contract for a starting goalie in this NHL that looked like he had some elite potential? Well, boy, do I have some news for you. Tanner Pearson signs a 3-year contract with the Canucks, an extension at $3.25 million per season. 3 years for Tanner Pearson, a backloaded contract per Thomas Drance with no formal expansion protection. That was rumored. It might be like a handshake sort of deal. A full no trade clause for next year in the first year, 7-team no trade clause in the second year, and no protection whatsoever in year three. In my opinion, this isn't a good move, and people on Twitter agree. Even 1 year at this number is probably a little bit too much. At his peak, Tanner Pearson was a 40 to 45 point player, especially in his time with the Kings. He had his best season of his career last year. He had 45 points in just 69 games, a 53-point pace. Unfortunately, this year has not been the same story. He's battled an injury recently, but during the time that he was healthy, only 11 points in 33 games. So this is basically a drop from a 53-point pace down to a 27-point pace. That's basically a cut in half. So I have count them, five big complaints about this. The first one, you're getting nothing for him at the deadline. Now look, I went over in a video a couple weeks ago when he was hurt that your value for Tanner Pearson likely isn't that high. You're talking maybe a fourth, maybe a fifth, something in there. Maybe a third if you're lucky. But still, Tanner Pearson's a fairly replaceable player. Even a fourth would be a nice asset going into the expansion draft. Might be able to use that and pick up a player that a team might not be wanting to lose for nothing. My second big one is the term. Tanner Pearson's going to be 29 at the start of next season. He turns 29 in August. He shouldn't be getting 3 years and trade protection after the worst year of his career. Look, I like Tanner Pearson, and last year and in the bubble, he was great. He was a solid player for this team, but we just saw a player basically hit a wall and decline heavily. Sure, it could be an outlier. He could go right back to scoring 45 points over the next 3 years. Canucks fans will love him, and they'll love the contract in that time. But players don't usually get better as they get older. This could be an outlier, but it also might not be. If we see next year he scores, 30 points, and then the year after he scores maybe 27 points, and then like 23 points. Players just don't get better into their 30s. And betting on a guy to turn around his career after showing that he might not have it left in him this season, definitely a risky move, and in my opinion, a risk that you don't need to take. Number 3 was the rumored expansion draft protection, and it is most likely that they'd probably just protect him anyways. And according to Drance, there's no formal trade or expansion draft protection in this deal, but they could have a handshake agreement saying, "Look, we're going to protect you. You're fine here." And the issue with that is now you use up one of your slots. Right? You have 7 forward slots that you can use to protect players, and the Canucks have an abundance of slots. They don't have the players need that. Like they don't have a bunch of people knocking on the door that they need to fill these slots with. You're talking about risking losing guys like Roussel or Beagle, or maybe a guy like McEwen at this point, which would hurt, but not as much as some other players. But the ability to use these slots, right? We saw teams in the Vegas expansion draft take advantage of these protection slots, and the Canucks kind of did that this summer with Nate Schmidt. We had Vegas, who knew they would end up losing Nate Schmidt for nothing, and he was expensive on their books, and they just couldn't fit him in anymore. Well, the Canucks were able to get him for a 3rd-round pick. So if you're able to trade a guy like Tanner Pearson, get a 3rd-round pick in return, then maybe right before the expansion draft, you can use that 3rd-round pick, go to some other teams and say, "Hey, this is your 8th best forward. You're not going to protect him. Seattle's going to take him from you for nothing. How about we toss a 3rd-round pick your way so you don't lose him for nothing? You look good in front of your fan base. We get a better player than what he's worth, and Seattle is the only real loser in that scenario." But using up these protection slots means less capability to do that. So that's one thing that I've been stressing a lot is weaponize your protection slots. Like this team should have been weaponizing cap space. Again, I've never really had the confidence that the Canucks are going to do this because they've showed in the past that they're not really apt to weaponizing their cap space. Anyways, reason number 4, the money's too high. And the money's not just too high for right now, because I think it is. I think the money for next year is a bit much. Over $3 million for a guy who only is at a 27-point pace this year. Again, potentially an outlier, but maybe not. But it's too high for the window that Jim Benning has set. Jim Benning has said, we think that we're going to be a competitive team 2 years from now. Now, that would be the 9th year of his tenure as GM, which would be one of the longest tenures we've ever seen in Canucks history. So if the Canucks are finally going to be rid of, in 2 years, the Louis Eriksson contract, the Jay Beagle contract, the Antoine Roussel contract, the Brandon Sutter contract, right? All of these are off the books 2 years from now. But if you just go around and sign a guy who in 2 years will be 30 years old and potentially a replacement level player at that point, or at least maybe like a low tier third liner or a decent third liner, giving a guy like that $3.25 million isn't going to look very hot in that window. You're handcuffing yourself for no real reason, in my opinion. I don't see the need to be. I don't see why you're lining up ready to hand Tanner Pearson this money when that could go into some other places. And that leads into reason number 5 that I don't really like this deal, and that is getting the deal done before Pettersson and Hughes. Now, I get the time crunch on this one. If you're Jim Benning, you want to have this deal done before the trade deadline for leverage sake, right? If you wait till after the trade deadline to re-sign Tanner Pearson, then Pearson can say, look, I want even more money. What, you're going to lose me for nothing in free agency after you didn't trade me at the deadline? So I can see that aspect of it. But on the other hand, you could have just traded him at the trade deadline if he wouldn't have taken a lower number. But also, you have 2 franchise level players, a franchise level center and a franchise level defenseman waiting without contracts for next year in Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. Yes, they're RFAs. Yes, you can wait them out and you don't have to sign them before the UFA deadline. You have time with Pettersson and Hughes. But why are you tying money up, committing $3 million into guys like Tanner Pearson, who you could have circled back to in June? You could have traded Pearson away and said, look, we'd love to have you back next year. We're going to send you off. You can go play for a cup somewhere again, and we'll see what happens. And then we'll reach out to you on July 1st and we'll see what we want to do. But instead, they said they prioritized Tanner Pearson ahead of Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. And if you're Pettersson and Hughes, you're not saying, well, looks like even more money's tied up, right? This is pushing them even further into maybe down that bridge deal territory where, if I'm Pettersson and Hughes, I'm going to say, well, now we got to wait our 3 years, take a bridge deal. And then when some money's freed up 4 years from now, when we can cash in big. So, not a big fan of the deal. I think it's an overpayment. I think it's an overcommitment term wise. I think you would have been better off trading him. I think you could go out and pick someone up of a pretty equal caliber for maybe $2.5 million in free agency. Free agency is going to be wild this year. There's going to be so many players looking for teams with a flat cap, and the Canucks would have been in a decent place to maybe spend this $3 million a little bit better, maybe get another player maybe a little bit younger or of a similar caliber on a lower term deal, or just commit more of that money to Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, because you know what? You want to make these guys happy and you want them to stay in Vancouver for their whole career. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on this deal right down in that comments section below. Also, new show starting Monday, Canucks After Dark with Canuck Clay. I recommend you click the link in the description. You go subscribe to that channel. It's going to be fun. Weekly show, Monday nights, 10 p.m. Anyways, that's all I've got for you guys. Hope you guys have a good rest of your Thursday, and I'll talk to you later.